Thank you very much, Susanti, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And it's a great privilege to be here today. And it's difficult to speak after such a compelling speaker like Faye. So it was a wonderful story about how millennial philanthropy and how young people are envisioning the world for us, for their children. And I think this is really the best testimony of what we're trying to achieve with the SDGs. Me coming from the UN, I think my vision is that our partners outside of the UN really internalize, take the sustainable development goals as their own. I think that, like Faye has done today, and this is just the best reward to be in this kind of conversation. And I maybe would like to start with my personal story as well. So when my grandfather was born in 1920s, the world had 2 billion people. And he lived in a very remote and poor part of Poland, but he had a very poor but happy childhood because he had both friends until the war hit in 1939. But at that time, there was a lot of crabs and fish in the place where they were living, and actually this was agriculture, subsistence agriculture was why they survived. When my father was living in the 1960s in the same very village, and he was the first man to go to the university, there were still crabs and eels and trouts left in that river, and he was playing with this every day and telling me stories how he used to hunt them at night. When I have my kids and we go back to the very same place in the very same remote Poland, there is no crabs, there is no river left, and there is no fish left in the river. And actually there is no river left. And we have 7 billion people today, and we are preparing for 2 more billion people to arrive by 2050. So what I am telling my kids is like, Faye yourself, is that we really need to take care of the world. And it's not just about the government's responsibility. The planet is our common responsibility, and I think this is the main message that the Sustainable Development Goals carry for us, that we all are in that big game. And yes, can I please have the next slide? The new Agenda 2030 is very comprehensive. It has got 17 goals, 139 targets, and 241 indicators. It's very expensive. It costs about between $2 and $4 trillion a year. I don't even know how many zeros it is. And no government is wealthy enough to pay for all these goals by its own. So really, it is all of us who have part to play in achieving the goals by 2030. But the vision is very compelling, because let's imagine that the stories like Faye told us today no longer exist. We don't have anybody left behind. We have no poverty. So the SDGs promise is that we will have zero poverty by 2030. And I think that's such a wonderful unifying framework that we all would like to work for this. From our perspective, working at UNDP, our big challenge is to see how philanthropy can learn, can understand the Sustainable Development Goals, and can be part of it, can be part of the solution. And the SDG Philanthropy platform that we are proud partners of, Philanthropy Indonesia, seeks to harness philanthropy's potential to address the opportunities that philanthropy can contribute, but also some of the challenges. So, can I have the slide? So, foundations already bring a lot of money into the Sustainable Development Goals without even knowing about it. And it is estimated that they will probably contribute to $364 billion to the SDGs. So, that's a lot of money, but money is not the only thing that philanthropy brings into Sustainable Development Goals. It's also their technical expertise, it's also their convening power, and it's also about this wonderful local knowledge that nobody else has. So what we say to the governments is that governments should see philanthropy as a partner in development, but a partner that it's not only about financing, a partner that really brings all these other wonderful assets to this game. Well, like with all other sectors in society, including the business sector or civil society, philanthropy has some challenges, and some of them is the fact that actually there is very little transparency and very little data sharing about what philanthropy does and why. And the philanthropic giving, the philanthropic sector itself is very diverse and it's very wonderful, but at the same time it's very fragmented and very isolated and working in a lot of silos, and very often not connected to the national development plans. So for example, since I have been working in the field of philanthropy for the last 5 or 10 years, I have seen a lot of wonderful solutions which were sponsored and carried out by philanthropy, but they were never picked up by the broader markets or the government, because philanthropy very often works in parallel to what governments do. And for example, in Africa or in Ghana actually, we have been working with our philanthropic partners on, philanthropic partners have been investing for more than a decade in bringing water and sanitation to some of the remote villages in Ghana, and they invested more than $100 million over the last decade in that project. And after 10 years, they decided to take statistics together with UNICEF, and it turns out that actually the water access in that very remote area of Ghana is worse than it was before they started the project. Why? Because they were investing in wells and groundwater, but as well as capacity building to local society, but they never actually linked it up with municipal water plans. And after 3 or 5 years, these wells actually got completely forgotten. All these investments have been lost. So as the SDG Philanthropy platform, what we try to do is we bring philanthropy together with the UN and governments to work together on the Sustainable Development Goals. And what it means, we want philanthropy to understand what SDGs are about and how to engage, and create entry points for them to engage, to collaborate with governments at the countries. And we, as the UN system, see ourselves as facilitators of this progress. If I can have this next slide, I don't know if, the next one, please. No, the one before, yes. Can we see that, can we show this video here on the next slide? Yes. So we prepared a little movie which really is the best way to explain how we're trying to work with philanthropy.
Philanthropy is constantly evolving with innovative ways of giving and growing rapidly in developing countries. Philanthropy has the resources, scale and potential to greatly contribute to international development. The Millennium Development Goals have succeeded in pulling together resources to tackle the most pressing social issues. Most foundations worked independently from the MDGs, yet the key lesson learned is that multi-stakeholder partnerships can accelerate progress on the goals. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It's time for action. We're at a pivotal moment for global development, where philanthropy has a critical role to play. The challenge is big, and the stakes are high. Sustainable Development Goals apply to all countries, with a series of ambitious targets to end extreme poverty, fight inequality and injustice, and tackle climate change for everyone by 2030. Partnerships are essential to achieving the SDGs. It requires all people to be involved. We need to look at the big picture. Who is doing what? What resources do we have? At what scale? In this ecosystem, where are you? Where do your interventions best fit alongside other foundations, policies, and organizations? The SDGs offer a shared vision for our humanity, coordination of efforts, shared measurement, and open communication. The SDG Platform for Philanthropy is a new partnership effort between the United Nations Development Programme, Foundation Center, and a group of leading foundations, guided by the Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors. We have our partnership efforts in 4 countries: Kenya, Colombia, Indonesia, and Ghana. We facilitate collaborations that advance SDGs, including SDGs 4, 6, 10 and 16. Kenya has a thriving philanthropy sector and is experiencing rapid economic growth, but inequalities continue to exist, especially for youth. Kenya Vision 2030 aims to transform Kenya into a prosperous and globally competitive nation. In Kenya, we contributed to creating Kenya Philanthropy Forum, a space for philanthropy to collectively address common interests: women's empowerment, youth employment, financial inclusion and education, and skills development. The platform sdgfunders.org is an open-source website that captures philanthropy data from around the world and provides insights and roadmaps for better engagement, collaboration, and partnerships. It's time to take action. It's time for partnerships.
Thank you. So, if we go to the next slide, I would like to invite everyone to look at the SDG funders and see how much philanthropy is already contributing to the specific sustainable development goals. I think it's very important that we all have evidence what philanthropy's potential is in development. And more important, we also have to understand that what are the areas where philanthropy really likes to invest. And I would say, just from my top of the head, anecdotal evidence, education and health are two preferred areas of investment by philanthropy around the world, be it Indonesia, Kenya, Ghana, United States, America. But there are other fields. There are 17 sustainable development goals, and they are all important. I think it's through portals like this, we also know what the gaps are, and how we can work together with the government and business sector to make sure that all of these goals actually receive our attention. Can I have the next slide? The SDG Philanthropy platform is a plethora of all these partners, and the partnership is obviously continuously growing. Philanthropy in Indonesia is one of them, and it has been one of the leading partners together with our partners in countries where we also operate: Kenya, Ghana, Colombia, and now more recently in Zambia. And through local partners such as Philanthropy Indonesia, our activities are very important here. The other important partners is obviously the BAPENAS, the Ministry of Development, because thanks to their efforts and their leadership and being open to working with philanthropy, Indonesia is really the leading country which has recently drafted the presidential decree on multi-stakeholder implementation of the SDGs. And really from my perspective, where I work and look at all the countries, that decree is really game-changing, not just for Indonesia, but around the world. And ladies and gentlemen, these new solutions are not really coming from the OECD countries anymore. They are coming from the emerging countries. And that's why this energy here, the leadership of philanthropy in pushing the sustainable development goals is really commendable. So I would really want to thank you for your efforts here and the success. If I can have the next slide. In terms of the practicalities, the SDG Philanthropy platform is there to guide philanthropy at all important steps, the roadmap that has to be taken in terms of really understanding what the SDG mean for them. And first, what we do is we need to have a mapping. We try to understand who are the philanthropic players and what they're engaged with, what are the SDG processes, what are the government plans with regard to implementation or integration of the SDGs, the national development plans. Then obviously the second key step is to engage philanthropy, to socialize sustainable goals among them. We engage them in a conversation about what it is that them as philanthropy can do, where are the gaps that philanthropy can bring in, considering their strengths. And obviously, we need to address this very critical point of building a culture where philanthropy really wants to share data. Because the SDGs will not be achieved if we don't have more information about who is doing what. And this is really a critical step in understanding how to mobilize all the possible resources to finance this expensive agenda. Can I have the next slide, please? And we will skip that. And finally, I would like to share with you a few lessons about or achievements from other countries. Perhaps this could be also an inspiration to you. So, for example, in Kenya, we have really mapped out all the processes, actors, interventions behind the SDGs in the country. We have found that there is more than 200 local Kenyan philanthropic foundations, most of them by now engaged in the SDG philanthropy process. And the government has recently, when they launched the SDGs in the country, the president commanded the Kenyan philanthropy for their leadership on bringing the goals into Kenya and taking such a strong leadership on some of the activities, and especially around education. And if I can have the next slide, please. And there, in Kenya, we do have a conversation between the Ministry of Education, who invited the Kenyan philanthropy working on education to bring inputs into the reform of the National Sectoral Education Plan. And why it's important? Kenyan philanthropy works mostly at the local level, like Indonesian foundations, and they do have wonderful data and experience of how to improve quality of education in Kenya, which has been one of the main priorities for the government. So when the Minister of Education spoke at this meeting, he said that he really didn't expect that the Kenyan philanthropy will be the sector that will really change the way that the National Sectoral Development Plan will move forward, and with all these wonderful resources. And can I have the next slide, please? And as I mentioned to you already, thanks to our partners here in Indonesia, we have that opportunity to have philanthropy leading the field in the country. I would like to say that Philanthropy Indonesia is also very well connected globally. They are a member of WINGS, which is the Philanthropic Association of Global Philanthropic Association, also promoting the SDGs as a collaboration framework. Philanthropy Indonesia and Indonesian philanthropy is very well networked with other countries, not just in the global south, but also in the United States, where, for example, we also launched the SDG platform. And taking this new ventures of engaging the millennial philanthropy that will lead the way, as well as venture philanthropy that is really a big opportunity for implementing the SDGs here. So in the publication, which hopefully will arrive tomorrow and you'll all have access to it, called Converging Interest Collaboration Philanthropy for the SDGs, you will really see what are the big opportunities, where are the key elements that enable philanthropy to work better with the governments. For once, is that governments have to recognize philanthropy as a development partner, like it has already happened in Indonesia. Two is that the government has to make enabling environment for philanthropy to really invest in the SDGs. And I really commend, and I think this is where the SDG philanthropy in Indonesia is leading to, is the next challenge to make sure that all the philanthropic contribution in SDGs, thank you, are actually recorded as part of the national development plans. So with this, I would like to thank you very much for your attention today. And if you have any questions, please come and talk to me. I'll be here for the next 4 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karolina.